Joining us in this session is Dr. Melanie Lott. She's a professor of physics at Denison University, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what that means on the day-to-day, and then we'll get into how you become interested in physics and maybe what you can do with that. So take it away, Melanie.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here. So I'm in the physics department at Denison, as was mentioned, but my research area is biomechanics. So that means, as you could probably tell by the name, it's a combination of biology with mechanics or physics. So I study basically the physics of how the human body moves. And in particular, I'm especially interested in physics of dance and studying one big research question I've had recently is how dancers maintain balance while doing a spin called pirouettes. Also at Denison, I teach, and I teach anything from introductory physics classes to our upper level classes. Some of my favorites are I really like labs. So teaching our experimental physics courses is one of my favorites.
So what, just because you ended on that, I'm curious, what makes experimental physics like your favorite course to teach?
So I've always been really curious and kind of trying to figure out how things work. And always interested in the hands-on aspect. I've always really enjoyed labs. And I was fortunate when even in high school, my physics class, our teacher incorporated a number of labs. So I've always just been, really interested in trying to, figure out how things work, but also kind of building things. I remember one of my favorite labs as an undergraduate in our electronics lab, we built a radio, and it was sort of a MacGyver style. We used paper towel tubes and some wire and paper clips and foil and things that, you wouldn't think would be able to turn into a radio. And in the end, they were working radios, and I just thought that was just so cool. So yeah, I've always just, there's something about, doing the physics and feeling the physics work that helped really solidify it in my mind always when I was learning it. So yeah, the hands-on aspect has always been really fun for me.
It always makes it fun, definitely, no matter what we do, right?
Yeah.
So I love the applied nature of your physics because it's not just this abstract concept. It's really like how well, you mentioned, like, so the physics of a pirouette probably sticks out to me a little bit because my daughter just started dance, right? So we
Oh,
can
great.
probably all think about experiences maybe we've had dancing, whether in lessons or otherwise. But let's go back to the very beginning because you had told me that you had dance experience. So how did maybe that tie into maybe unknowingly even leading you down your path
Mhm.
to study dance from a science perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I started dancing when I was about 6 or 7, and I danced, very regularly all throughout until I graduated from high school. And then I took an Irish dance class in college, which was really neat because I had never taken that form of dance before. But I also was really involved in running and track and field. And one reason why I didn't dance in college was because I was on the varsity track and field team. And my coach, he always encouraged me to think about how, the physics that I was learning in class could apply to my running, or I was a hurdler. So, we would have conversations about, why might I be, doing something with my lead leg or trail leg that would help me run faster by thinking about the physics. Or, if you think about, like the ice skater effect, when you if an ice skater is spinning and their arms are out further and then they bring them in, they start to spin faster. It's like a similar idea where if you're hurdling and you bring your trail leg, so the leg that's in the back, closer to your body, you can move it faster. So kind of thinking, it was just always fun to, he was really always encouraging me to think about, how the physics applied to the movement. And then it wasn't until later on late in my junior year of college that I was having lunch. We had a speaker come back for something we have called Physics Honors Day, and an invited speaker to talk about all these interesting applications of physics. And, he mentioned physics of cooking, and we were having conversation about these things. He mentioned physics of dance, and Professor Ken Laws, who was a faculty member at Dickinson at the time, who had a book on the physics of dance. And I thought, oh, I have to check out this book from the library, and we had it in our library. And it was one of those moments where I thought to myself, it's been fun for me to kind of think about how this applies to track or running, but I didn't know that someone was actually doing research on the topic. And that was one moment where I really thought, hey, this is something that it combines things I really love, both physics and dance. And this maybe would be something I'd be interested in studying further.
Well, it's easy to see that you love what you do, which is always wonderful to end up in a career that you love so much and you get to look forward to every day. So let's dive into that a little bit. Like, how did you get to where you are? You told us a little bit about how you were in college and you kind of fell into the physics of dance
Mhm.
and had that opportunity. So what were your next steps?
Yeah, so at that point, I was actually thinking about what I might want to do a senior research project on, and I ended up talking to Dr. Kim Copeland, who was on the faculty. I actually am a Denison grad too, and she's the provost now, but she was on the physics faculty at the time, and just with this idea of maybe could I do a senior research project on the physics of dance, and she was very encouraging about it, and so that's what I did, and I had a thought that maybe if I reached out to Dr. Laws, who had written Physics of Dance, and just kind of asked him if he had any advice for me, or if he had a talk that was coming up that I might be able to come to, you know if I could get some advice from him, thinking to myself, boy, what are the odds that this great this book author would get back to me. He wrote me back the same day with such positive encouragement about my project. And he said, yes, I do have a talk coming up, and here's where it is and the date. So, and he helped me kind of think about an interesting research question. And it, ended up where after I graduated from Denison, I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to grad school. I kind of just didn't know. And it turns out that he encouraged me to come be a research associate in physics of dance with him at Denison after I graduated. So that was really encouraging for me that, after I sent him my final project, he said, hey, why don't you come work with me? And so that's what I did. And at that point in time, I was looking into biomechanics programs for graduate school, and ended up after my year at Dickinson, went to University of Michigan to get my master's in biomechanics. And at that point in time, I wasn't sure. I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. If I wanted to be a physics professor like I am now, I had no idea. I didn't really know if I'd want to do that because I didn't know how I would be a biomechanist, but be a physics professor. So I was thinking about getting my PhD in biomechanics, but I was doing some teaching, some tutoring with physics, and I really, really loved working with the physics students and doing the tutoring I was doing. So I thought to myself, well, maybe I want to be a physics teacher. And so after I got my master's at Michigan, I taught high school physics for a couple of years at a school in Florida. And then at that point is when I decided, I really do miss the biomechanics part of it. Is there a way that I can get my PhD in physics while doing biomechanics research? Because actually, so Dr. Copeland, who I mentioned before, she's been a mentor to me and, throughout, and I was asking her, if I got my PhD in biomechanics, would I be able to say, if I did end up deciding to want to be a professor at a small liberal arts college like a Denison, would I be able to do it? And she said, no, well, you'd have to have your PhD in physics. And so it turns out that, so Ken Laws, who was my research advisor when I was at Dickinson for that year, he said, why don't you go to Bryn Mawr or apply for graduate school at Bryn Mawr, where you can get your PhD in physics, and I can see if they're amenable to me being your research advisor on a biomechanics or physics of dance kind of application. So that's what I ended up doing, and Ken advised that work, and Ken was a wonderful mentor all throughout. So
Well, yeah, you can never underestimate the power of a good mentor.
exactly.
And it sounds like both Dr. Copeland and Law were incredibly helpful in just encouraging, right? So that's such an important part of it, is encouraging you to both explore as well as providing you with ideas and connections and opportunities to really solidify your interests.
Yes, yeah, they were tremendous mentors to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So you're lucky to have those mentors, and I was going to ask you about that, but I don't know if there's probably anybody else that would have had as much impact as the two of them on you kind of taking that path. Um, so,
Yeah. Yeah,
God,
Ken, in terms of the specific, physics of dance, my research area, Ken was definitely my biggest mentor, and always, a big supporter, encourager of me and my work. So yes, always having that positive influence, giving me confidence where when I didn't necessarily feel like I felt confident. And similarly with Dr. Copeland, I remember there was a moment I remember sitting in her office when I was maybe a sophomore or something and looking around and kind of, being like, oh, it would be great to be like Dr. Copeland, and just having someone that I could look to and say, maybe I could do that, and see myself in her. Um, yeah.
No, that's a great way to put it too, because that if you don't know that there's an opportunity or an option for, an area of study like the physics of dance, if
Mhm.
you had never been exposed to that, possibly
Mhm.
by your physics professors or, your track coach, then, where would you be, right? You have
Mhm.
to have those opportunities to see options for yourself and see yourself in the place of someone else to know, really what you might want to explore. And that's actually what I love about this program is that all of our
Mhm.
viewers really get to see some really amazing examples of not only just professions, but also the people that are in them and how they got there.
Mhm.
And while, it really sounds like I'm not going to call not knowing what you wanted to do necessarily like a challenge that you faced, because I think we all face that at some point of like, what is our next step or where do we want to go? Not necessarily where do we want to end up, because we know that it's always change opportunities are always going to continue to come. But what would be maybe an act like a challenge other than, finding your path that you faced along that journey?
Mhm.
Something that maybe felt like a block or a stumbling stone.
Yeah, I think, in general for me, and this is something that I still I still work on, to this day, is the, kind of having to do with confidence and perfectionism and taking risks. So I've always been a perfectionist, and it's great to want to do a good job on things, but worrying so much about doing something perfectly to be afraid to even start or afraid to take risks, right? I think that you have to take risks, in order to keep moving forward. And but the mentors and my parents and having people in my life that could encourage me and say, hey, you can do a great job at this, and give you that confidence that to keep moving ahead, or especially when you're uncertain about what you might say want to do, and if you look around and you see, seems like people know what they want to do, like for their job or their career in the end, and you kind of don't know. It can feel a little scary, but knowing that things will work out in the end, and it's okay to not know at that moment.
Mhm.
So yeah, it all comes back to having that good support system too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So tell us a little bit about then, like your research or your teaching. What is it that you want to do with it, and like where do you want it to go? Like those risks that you want to take, and
Yeah.
where you might see yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. So something a big project I'm working on right now is, I'm working on writing a book, Biomechanics of Dance. So, and I think a lot about Ken through this process. He just passed away this year, so I don't, as I'm going through these struggles, I think, oh, it would be great to talk to Ken some more about this. Um, but anyways, so writing a book on biomechanics of dance is my big project I'm working on now. And then, studying some other styles of dance is another area that I want to, continue to move towards. So I mentioned that I took an Irish dance course when I was, in college, and I'm working. There's an Irish dance teacher that I've been working with, and we started collecting some data this summer on a particular Irish dance move. So I'm just interested in exploring all sorts of different forms of dance, and how we can, study the physics of how movements are performed in order to help, understand if there are different ways that they can be taught to reduce injury risk, and things for dancers of, from a variety of different backgrounds.
That's fascinating.
Mhm.
So you've started the Irish dancing collection, and then you've also worked with it being ballet. You
Yes,
said pirouettes. Okay.
yes, yes.
And then obviously the connections you mentioned that also make sense to ice skating, but that's
Mhm.
another potential extension right there. That's
Mhm.
fascinating. So what would you say to somebody who is curious, about physics or about biomechanics? Maybe they've never heard of a blend between, biology and physics like that before. What would your piece of advice be to somebody who's like, I want to look into that more, or I'm curious to see what it really means to to apply physics in such a everyday way.
Yeah, well, if they're interested in dance in particular, Ken's book is actually written for dancers and for people who may have no physics background, and you can understand at a conceptual level, how the physics can be applied to the moving body. I think that if they are taking a physics class, they could bring it up with their physics teacher, and see if their teacher has any ideas of examples or things that that they know about that can be used to help advance what they're interested in. I've worked with some students who have done science fair projects on applying physics to human movement. So there's sort of different ways that if they're interested in getting involved in that kind of a
Mhm.
sense on a science fair project. But there's also something called National Biomechanics Day. That's another thing that if they Google that, there's some activities that go on all across the country, that I think some of them can be done remotely as well. But it's particularly meant for young people to learn about biomechanics, and how that in like having little experiments that they can do, or what biomechanics is and how physics can be applied to human movement.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be sure to share that book with our viewers as well as a fun way to kind of get started and explore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any last things that we're missing? Things like you've already mentioned a lot of great advice for somebody who is maybe in a physics class or is curious to take that next step. What else would you suggest to somebody who maybe is interested in research or moving into higher ed, even possibly looking at other applications, or even advice that you wish you would have heard at a younger age, a middle school or a high school age?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think for me, having the advice of taking risks, don't sweat the small stuff. You don't have to have it all figured out from the beginning. Be curious, ask questions. In the classes that you have, if you think of a question, ask them. Um, and I think if you're thinking about what you might want to do in the future, or thinking about what you might want to major in, it's good to explore there too. So if you take a class that you might think sounds interesting, and then if you don't think it suits you, then it's okay to switch too. I mean, I had a experience when I did an RU when I was after my sophomore year in college, and I thought, hey, maybe this research area sounds interesting to me. It was experimental, right? I mentioned how I really like doing experiments. It was like an experimental condensed matter physics, and when I did it, it was in San Diego, so that helped. But the research itself, it was the kind of experience that helped me learn that this was not the kind of research that I wanted to do. So those kinds of experiences are valuable too. So if you just take risks, try things, and you might find you like it, you might find that you don't. It's just all part of, the process.
Yeah. It is really important to note that every experience has value, even if it's not something that is ultimately what you do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, on the note of taking risks and just trying experiences, I hope that our viewers are inspired to try something new and to explore a little bit further. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit about your journey. And we hope that we have some future physicists watching, and we'll connect any questions that they have to you and to our community. So thanks,
Great.
Melanie, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.